Hello, everyone. Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Football Live Show. Again, 5 days a week we're on, 11 a.m. Eastern. But, of course, if you miss any of the shows, you can always catch the replay on RotoWire YouTube during the preseason. That's Thursday and Friday. We're out, but now we're back 5 straight days. Remember, if you're liking the show, please consider hitting that like and subscribe button if you're on RotoWire YouTube. Helps the bosses know you appreciate it, and it helps me a lot. Again, on Twitter, if you're not following me at Jim Coventry NFL, please consider it also. I do player threads 5 to 7 days a week during the preseason. And would you like to draft a fantasy football team with me, co-owners? Here's what we can do. It's a charitable cause. We'll get to hang out on a video call. We can talk football with each other, do a draft together. You can sign up by using the link that's pinned to my Twitter profile at Jim Coventry NFL. It's Pros with Joes. Amazing opportunity. I've met some good friends by drafting with them the previous few years. Let's get after it. All right, stay tuned to the end of the show. Jay Felicio of the Athletic Fantasies coming on to talk about players that he's targeting in 2023 drafts. All right, let's go over a couple news points here. Baltimore Ravens news. So, for the first time this summer, J.K. Dobbins participated in team drills on Friday. So, look, Dobbins had that little hold, and he wasn't excited about his contract situation. He's missed a lot of time. Hey, Wendy, glad you're here. So, look, Dobbins, he had to show up. He had no leverage. Maybe Jonathan Taylor at some point will follow suit, not sure. But let's talk about Dobbins here. So, look, Dobbins had that 2021 ACL injury. He never seemed to be fully 100% for most of the 2022 season. He missed some time. He said he wasn't himself, but yet in 8 games, he still averages 5.7 yards per carry. And this is in an offense that everybody knew they were running. Now, they had heavy personnel, and they were able to overwhelm some opponents. But Dobbins, after week 14, last 4 games of the year, he averages almost 7.5 yards per carry, and it was a pretty tough schedule. 4 divisional games. Now, the Browns were garbage against the run, but that said, he was playing at a high level. 58th percentile broken tackle rate. Good, not great. But here's what I like about Dobbins this year. He's a big value in my mind because with Todd Monken calling the offense, there's a couple of things that could really boost Dobbins' value. The first one is if they're going to use 3 receiver sets as opposed to the 2 tight end sets they used to use and fullbacks and all 22 personnel. Well, look, if Dobbins is going to see light boxes with the incredibly mobile quarterback Lamar Jackson, Dobbins could explode. And he may not even need a lot of carries to do that. And also, Coach Monken, unlike Greg Roman, will utilize the screen pass game. So if we're looking, even if J.K. Dobbins is getting 15 carries a game, which was pretty basic for him, even in his 2021 rookie year after the beginning when he got phased in, if he is going to be utilizing the screen game, he is excellent after the catch. He makes people miss. He runs through people. So I think taking a flyer on J.K. Dobbins, who has no leverage to continue to sit, he's back in. I think you make that pick with potential for really high upside. He's a superstar, just hasn't been able to keep it together with injuries and situation yet. Same team, Baltimore Ravens. Rashod Bateman returns to practice on Friday. Now, look with Bateman. I want to point this out. If you've listened to me before, you've heard this. Yes, week 6 last year, he suffered a season-ending foot injury. But here's what I want you to know. He had the cortisone shot in June, and myself included. We all got a little freaked out. His ADP, which is about 90, went over 100, and it's staying there. People are freaked out. But here's what I learned. I was listening to Joe Dolan's Fantasy Points Franchise Focus podcast. He had a beat writer from Baltimore on. And here's what happened. We found out the cortisone shot that Bateman received was not specifically due to recovery from the injury. The screw that was in the foot was causing discomfort, and it was for that. Now, the beat reporter intimated the screw was yet to come out, and it will come out. And at that point, the healing will have been done already. If that's the case, and I'm buying that story, Rashod Bateman is a massive breakout potential player. Now, he played 12 games as a rookie. So again, he's missed time both years, right? 7.6 yards per target as a rookie. Last year, only 6 games, very limited sample size, 28 targets. But his yards per target went from 7.5 to over 10. Yards per reception went from 11.2 to 19. With Monken in there, Bateman, again, very limited sample size, 98th percentile yards after the catch. He is the prime breakout candidate. Now, I like Zay Flowers, and he's going to be a good player. He's still building chemistry with his quarterback. Bateman, on limited time, has that. We know Mark Andrews is there, no problem. Odell Beckham, over 30, coming off an ACL. Bateman is in the best position to come out the gate hot and to retain that. I think at ADP, I think he is an outstanding value for fantasy managers and drafts. Man, I went Ravens heavy there. Hey, at RotoWire, we got something new for all the DFS players out there. You know that's you, right? New and improved NFL DFS lineup optimizer. You can use about 30 different customization options to build winning lineups at a fraction of the cost of a lot of our competitors. Preseason and week 1 stats live now. Be sure to check that out. All right, if you want a free subscription trial at RotoWire, go to rotowire.com/Jim, and we'll find out what it's all about. But the DFS tool, you'll see what that optimization is. Now, Washington Commanders news. I'll switch from the Ravens finally. Coach Ron Rivera, he announced Friday, of course, we knew this was coming, for the most part, Sam Howell's named the Commander starting quarterback. Now, Jacoby Brissett was a fine option for the Browns last year, and if things are problematic with Howell, they can go back to that. But to give Howell the opportunity probably makes the most sense for them. We know the upside of Jacoby Brissett is quite limited. They want to see, most likely, if Howell can give them more upside. So, as a starter, what do we get? Look, I'm going to be very honest here. Anybody that says they know what Sam Howell is at this point probably is making a bit of a stretch. He was picked in the 5th round of the 2022 draft. Now, obviously, teams in the NFL are desperate for quarterback help, right? And teams will reach for a quarterback. So when a quarterback falls to the 5th round, that tells you a lot of teams saw red flags on the player. So get that. And I know Howell was seen as a more high-profile prospect before last year. And he plays in 1 game last year. So again, we can't take much from that. In that game, again, Dallas wasn't really competitive in that game. 57.9 completion percentage. Again, it's 1 game. He did throw long passes. 4 of his completions were over 20 yards. 1 of those hit for 40. He ran 5 times for 35 yards and a touchdown. We really like that. And he puts up 22 fantasy points. So that's going to give us some reference in 1 small sample. There's a lot of different things. And anyway, he gave them enough to say, let's take a longer look at you. Fantasy-wise, I'm going to wait till the bottom of the hour. Jay Felicio is going to come on, and he's going to talk more specific about Sam Howell. And I don't want to take away Jay Felicio's thunder. Jay's an excellent fantasy analyst, and I want to make sure you hear his take on it, and I can always give more on mine later. Now, the RotoWire Fantasy Football Draft Kit app is up-to-the-minute cheat sheet, news source. We all need that. Of course, RotoWire does have the best news in the business. We have many full-time people on the case, part-timers chipping in. We have editors making sure everything is looking great. And we do have the best news service of them. So anyway, if you're like me and you put players into tiers for your prep for drafts, the app, RotoWire app, allows you to do that too. Check out and see why the RotoWire draft app is currently the #1 ranked paid sports app in the Apple Store. All right, my show for today. Wide receivers who could finish as the overall wide receiver 1. And I'm not going to say Justin Jefferson, and I'm not going to say Jamar Chase, and I'm not going to say Tyreek Hill or Cooper Kupp, because we know that any of them are being drafted in that potential scenario. Now, I'm not going to go deep beyond this either. And I'm not saying these players will be the wide receiver 1. I want to paint the scenario for the best upside for these 3 players. And, of course, you'd have to have a little bit of a down season maybe from your Justin Jeffersons or Tyreek Hills. But these players, it's plausible, based on what I tell you, that they could have that crazy, crazy season. I'm going to start out with A.J. Brown. Now, he's being drafted per fantasymojo.com last 3 days, wide receiver 8, pick 13. So he's a second-round pick. He's the 8th receiver. So people clearly are not projecting him to be the guy, obviously. But here's what I want you to know. So last year, Brown comes over to the Eagles in that trade, first and a third-round pick. Steal. Anyway, he has career highs and catches, yards, and targets. Now, remember, when he was with Tennessee, he wasn't seeing more than 110 targets a season. He was very, very lightly using that offense. And it was always, now he missed time. Of course, he had some knee injuries on and off, nothing season ending, but it was a bit problematic. So as we're looking at A.J. Brown, 17 yards per reception. It was the best since his rookie year. Now, rookie year was bombs away, 20 yards per catch. But after that, it was lessened. But it was a very solid opportunity. Anyway, when I said his career highs, 88 catches, 1,496 yards, 145 targets. It was like 35 targets over his baseline. And, of course, he puts up 23 catches of over 20 yards. Big play guy, we knew that. And then with all that, of course, the high-octane offense is 11 touchdowns. But what can he do for an encore? So I think there's a world. The Eagles last year, they had a very, very favorable schedule, right? And when we look at the schedule, this year it seems tougher. Last year, the Eagles would come out in most games. If they had a very easy run defense, they would run early, but usually they came out throwing the ball. And when they threw early, they'd get that lead. And in the second half, you would frequently see them take their foot off the gas. And the passing numbers were mostly accomplished at halftime. This year, tougher schedule. It is possible the Eagles have to throw for 4 quarters in more games. Now, in the second half of the season, Devontae Smith was seeing more targets than A.J. Brown. But I think if they have to throw more, if the coaching staff realizes, as good as Devontae Smith is, A.J. Brown is one of the elite of the elite. So if that 145 targets goes up into the 165, 170 range, now we're talking the target share that the best of the best get. Now, Brown has the issue that a lot of his passes are downfield. So the completion rate goes lower, but the potential for big play is higher. He was 90th percentile yards after the catch last year, and that is not surprising. We have seen he is a beast. Rookie year, I called him Terrell Owens version 2.0. Now it's probably Terrell Owens version 1.1. They're that close in my mind in terms of being just insane players. They do similar things, right? The yards after the catch, they can beat you anywhere. So anyway, I think the fact that A.J. Brown could be in an even better scenario. And remember, his first year in, the coaching staff, now I know they lose their OC, but I still think they can find out more ways to utilize Brown in the familiarity and things they saw, things they learned their offseason look. So again, there is a scenario where A.J. Brown is the man at wide receiver this year. You're drafting him at the 1-2 turn in 12-team leagues, and he's a great pick there for sure. Injuries have been something in the past. We'll see how that works. But again, very exciting. All right, the next player, again, if the stars align right, he could finish as the wide receiver 1. I have him ranked as my wide receiver 7 or 8, I believe. Garrett Wilson. He's going off the board as a wide receiver 9 at pick 15. And so, again, he's a player in some leagues. You can get him just outside the 1-2 turn. You could get A.J. Brown and him if you have the turn and you don't want to take a running back. Now, we know that Garrett Wilson had horrific quarterback play last year. He only caught 82 of 147 targets, and the number of uncatchable targets was really, really high. Yet, Garrett Wilson comes out, 83 catches. I think it's 82 catches. I think I just screwed that up. 1,103 yards and only 4 touchdowns. Jets weren't scoring a lot of points, right? So I loved the fact he already showed the ability to get yards after the catch. He was 67th percentile there. And so he was the 10th pick in the draft. Morning, Dame Overboard. Glad you're here. RT the band, see you're here as well. Welcome. So when we're looking at last year, that 67th percentile yards after the catch, he was definitely fairly picked as a 10th overall pick in that draft. He is a superstar player, and I'll point out some things that I noticed last year that kind of showed his progression despite the bad quarterback play. So he surpasses 75 yards, Garrett Wilson does 8 times, but 7 of those 8, they came in the last 10 games. Also, uneven target share throughout the year, right? but he was targeted at least 9 times in his last 4 games. And then let's just break it down by the bye week. So see, and this is the thing, a lot of NFL teams during the bye week, they have time to look, especially their younger players, and make some adjustments. So Garrett Wilson, Brian, good morning. Before week 10, Garrett Wilson only averaged 7.5 targets, which is a good number. After the week 10 bye, he averaged 10 targets per game. Now, hey, extrapolation is fine here. 17-game schedule, I can do that math, times 10, 170 targets. That's that Davante Adams range, 180 he had, but that's that elite range of targets that we want to see from that player. And they moved him around. They put him in the slot 57% of the time. He can win anywhere. Now, you go from the quarterback play they had, and I don't know if Aaron Rodgers is going to be that same MVP level Aaron Rodgers, but it's going to be a massive upgrade over what they had last year. So even if Aaron Rodgers slides a bit, and this is another thing, very important intel here. The offensive coordinator is Nathaniel Hackett. Now, bad head coach last year with Denver. Nobody questions that. But remember, he was the offensive coordinator in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers. And when Davante Adams was the one, there was no competition for number 2. And we had, obviously, Aaron Rodgers. The Athletic, this is a great podcast. They had one of their local reporters reports this. This is a staggering number, okay? On 70% of the Green Bay pass plays, Davante Adams was the number 1 read. That is a ridiculously high number. 40%, yeah. 45, maybe. 70%. Now, Hackett and Rodgers in New York, you go from Garrett Wilson. Now, Allen Lazard's a great player. Excellent blocker. Very good situational receiver. Mecole Hardman probably uses a little more of a gadget guy. Corey Wilson kind of had his day 3-4 years ago whenever he had that 1,000-yard season or roughly around there. But that's my point. My point is Garrett Wilson is so far the alpha, and we've seen this paradigm or this model with Hackett and Aaron Rodgers. So if we're going to see that 70% number 1 read, we're going to see that 10 targets repeated. Yes, there is a world where Garrett Wilson gives you 1,600 yards and 10 touchdowns. That is not off the grid. Now, to be number 1 overall, you need a down season from Justin Jefferson. It could happen. May not. Probably won't. And I'm not saying Garrett Wilson will finish the wide receiver 1. But there is a case where that happens. All right, let's give you one more player here. Who else could finish as the wide receiver 1? All right. And again, these are all players that are going between 8 and 10 receiver on the board. So they're being drafted well, but they're certainly not being seen as number 1. Now, this player's done it before, so this isn't like the craziest thing in the world. And, I'll take these questions in a minute, too, after I do a Davante Adams. So Davante Adams, my 1. He's wide receiver 10, Fantasy Mojo ADP last 3 days, pick 18. So people are not seeing him as a Davante Adams that could be the number 1 guy. Here's what we look at. 2 straight 1,500-yard seasons already. That is an insane floor. And last year, it was not a healthy situation with the Raiders. The Raiders, Derek Carr, obviously they had problems. They let him go in, week 14? They just completely kicked him to the curb. They had problems, but they got him 180 targets. And they realized, Josh McDaniels realizes, you got to get the ball to Adams. I know he's disgruntled this year, but even if he gets traded, I don't care if he gets traded, he's still Davante Adams. He's going to be fine. When you trade alphas, they're fine. But right now, Jimmy Garoppolo, given all the warts, the ball is going into Adams' hands. He has at least 1,374 yards and 4 times in 5 years. He finds the end zone at least 10 in 5 of the last 6 years. And again, last year, that 180 targets, the offense was so bad he only caught 100 passes. If he gets that level of targets to Garoppolo, he's going to flirt with 115, 120. Tom McLaughlin, welcome aboard. Glad you're here. Good to see the great crowd here today. Thanks, everybody, for being with me. So anyway, Adams, he has 3 rough games last year, but receivers have those. You'll get a couple of them throughout the year. There were 3 games, 15 or fewer yards, but one of those games we got a report he was sick. He wasn't out. He only played 39 snaps in that game. So that one we kind of throw out. But from that point, unstoppable. Last year, 5 multi-touchdown games. So Josh McDaniels, again, realizes the importance of utilizing Adams. Also, Adams, this is a big number. He goes over 124 yards 7 times. And how about that baseline of 70? He does that 12 times. Talk about a floor ceiling, right? So now he's 30. No signs of decline. Davante Adams should be just fine. Now, again, we have the Discord with him. I get it. And I think if that Discord didn't take place, he would be a first-round pick. But I think it's a buying opportunity on Adams. But yes, again, we could see if that target share is up there. If Jimmy G can move the ball with him, after that, you can never say injury, right? Anybody could get hurt. If Jimmy G gets hurt, yeah, I get it. I get Aiden O'Connell, and we got Brian Hoyer. Yeah, I get it. But most teams, that's the problem. You go from your starting quarterback to the backup, you got a problem on your hands. So, again, these are 3 receivers. I'm not predicting they'll be the wide receiver 1, but you definitely can make a case for that. Got some time for some questions before Jay Felicio comes in. Let's see what we got here. So RT the band points out Russell Wilson seems like a weird player. How he fell off the cliff and then he abyssed last year. So what I noticed with Russell Wilson is the league, when the Seahawks turned him loose in the let Russ cook year, more than ever, the league realized how dependent on the deep pass he was. He always was a great deep passer. But when he it went from a run-based offense to a rush-based offense. When teams put an extra safety over the top, Russell Wilson is always looking downfield. He doesn't excel in the intermediate and short passes. And honestly, and this is somebody questioned, I know in a YouTube video, he's not a good screen pass quarterback. And people say, what's the easiest pass? How can he not be? In the screen game, the perfect screen quarterback places the ball exactly in the spot on your hand where you can accelerate immediately to top speed and get yards after the catch. A lot of quarterbacks can make a completed pass. It might be in your chest. That's not good. You need it to the lead hand. So those are some things that Russ struggles with. So yeah, can he dump the ball? Sure, but it's not optimal yardage. So Russell Wilson has flaws in his game, and we've already talked about in time past his size. He can't see the middle of the field well. It's always the offensive coordinators have always made adjustments in his game to get him away from there. So his sight line in the middle of the field is restricted by his height. And so he doesn't have that same high level athleticism now in his mid-30s as he had when he was in his 20s. And so it's a very big problem for Russell Wilson. And so Sean Payton, I don't know what he's going to do because he wants to do that screen game with Drew Brees. I don't think that, Drew Brees was the best screen game of our quarterback of our generation. So can Russell do better? Yes. Am I optimistic? I'm worried about him because he's aging again. He's not the guy to me that was going to age well. All right, let's see who else we got here. Wendy's got a question. 10-team PPR, you're in the 110, no tight end premium. So yeah, in 10-team, the thing I like about 10-team, there are a lot of good ways to make sure you have a loaded roster across the board. I think there are enough running backs later, and they're falling. There's some good ones falling this year. I think you can put a hammer down at wide receiver at that 110. There's a number of them that are going to fall there. Some I talked about earlier in the show. These are all potential players that give you floor ceiling combo. So yes, I think that definitely you may see Stephon Diggs in some leagues falls as far as 10. CeeDee Lamb falls there. The players I talked about, obviously Garrett Wilson will fall there in almost every league. And then I mentioned earlier we had A.J. Brown. You probably don't need to fool with Davante Adams at this point there. But yes, you have a number of good options, Wendy. So I think you definitely could do that. And then obviously you have plenty of time to deal with those running backs later. So yeah, I think that's a sweet call. And again, there's many different ways you can approach it. But this year, yeah, I think so. Going with those heavy, high-end receivers, that's a big hammer to have on the league. And then, Brian, so Amon-Ra St. Brown is a potential number 1 receiver. So here's the thing. Amon-Ra St. Brown, caught the perfect storm. As he comes in the league, he's 30 or now, leagues were going to the heavy, too high safety look, zone, a lot of zone. They play man. Every team plays man on a percentage of downs, but we see a lot of zone. And the slot receivers were really benefiting from the zone defense. Because if you are a player that navigates zone well and you find the soft spots in it, you have a clear advantage. So Amon-Ra St. Brown came into the league at the perfect time, and he was able to maximize what the league was giving him. And he's been a wonderful player. Now, here's what I want to point out. Both years, roughly 1,150 yards, 5 or 6 touchdowns. Now, his rookie year, he was eased in, but he kind of caught up for that when all of their receiver room went down, including Hawkinson, and he got all the targets down the stretch. So I think that leveled out. Last year, he missed a game, and he had some residuals. I believe ankle injury. I don't think it was hamstring. I think it was ankle. And but receivers miss time. Receivers get dinged up. So I think that's indicative. I think you could say, if you're going to tell me you got 15 healthy games, that's about right. And so if you're going to tell me St. Brown's an 1150 and 5 or 6 touchdown guy, that's a really good player. People are drafting him as high as the pick 9 in drafts. Now, he'll be a wide receiver 1, but people are drafting him as a top 7 wide receiver. Here's my issue with that. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown, his floor and his ceiling aren't that much different. I think the 1150 and 5, that's his floor. But do I think his ceiling is much more than 1250 and 7? I don't think so. And now you bring in Jahmyr Gibbs, running back, but they're going to run him on routes. But where are those routes going to be? Middle of the field. Sam Laporta comes in, talking him up. Where is he going to run his routes? Middle of the field. Is there going to be a target squeeze? And then the talk about moving St. Brown to the outside. And I get it. He had some win rate numbers people cited. He's not physical. He's not that fast. The league will catch up to him if he becomes an outside receiver. He's perfect as a slot. But here's my overall point. When we're looking at St. Brown, I can't in good conscience draft him ahead of Garrett Wilson or Davante Adams. Because, listen, here's my point. I don't think St. Brown's ceiling, which I said maybe 1250 and 7, I think that's Garrett Wilson's floor. And Davante Adams' floor is probably higher than that. So if you're going to tell me St. Brown's ceiling and the floor of Wilson and Adams is equal with the ceiling of St. Brown's a great pick at pick 14, pick 15. Beautiful pick. At pick 9, I've got to have Garrett Wilson or Davante Adams ahead of him. That's my point. Oh, these are some great questions. I am so excited. We're about to bring Jay Felicio in here. I see him coming into the studio. He's got to get his video showing up here. And, oh, my goodness, there he is, Jay Felicio. Good friend of mine. I've known Jay for a few years. Jay had me on one of his shows. Jay, I wish I remember the name of that show. But you had me on your show.
That was a number of years ago. It was 2-3 years ago. It was War Room Live. It's Thursday nights before the Thursday night game. We would go on and just take questions. And that was our first interaction. Our guy, Marty, connected us.
Yes. And, Marty's awesome.
Love Marty. And ever since then, we've been good friends.
Now, Jay is not just an excellent fantasy analyst. He is legitimately one of the finest people you will ever met. Mr. Scampers is in the house. Dollar Bill's in the house. But yes, Jay is one of the finest people you will ever meet. High moral code, treats people with dignity and respect, always a positive word. If you're not following Jay at GmenJ, it is something you need to put on the priority list. Welcome, Richard. So Jay works for the Athletic Fantasy. Congratulations, my man.
I appreciate that. Very excited.
Yes, you deserve it, man. You had this stuff coming. And also, you're the content manager, Front Yard Fantasy. I've been blessed to be on their great show. And Jay, you've had me on there. I think they told me 8 times last time.
You're getting close to the double-digit club. There's a handful. Our guy Craig, we call him the chat historian because he went through and literally every single game show he went through and counted how many times people have been on, winning, stuff like that. So yeah, you're getting up there. We'll have to get you double digits before the season's over.
Yes. Just before here, I want to say hi to a couple people. We're going to have you tell everybody hi. Ladarius Brown's in the house. Yes, glad to see you. Famous Jay. And Jay, Famous Jay, that's what I love. Garrett Wilson and Davante Adams. I was talking about them earlier, Jay Felicio, saying how they both have incredible potential ceiling. And yes, you can usually get them in the second round of your draft. Adams, like pick 15. Garrett Wilson, it depends on your draft. Sometimes you got to get him at the turn. Sometimes he'll fall a couple picks after, but yes, 100%. Richard's in the house, and then RT DeBrand. I'm going to welcome in Jay. Jay, say hello to everybody. Tell them what you want to say, and then we'll talk about your players, and then at the end, we'll tell them what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, there's really nothing else I can say. I really appreciate that introduction. And, you talking about me as a person means more than anything when it comes to content creation. That really means a lot to me. So thank you. See a bunch of, my good friends in the chat. Yeah, like you said, follow me over at GMenJ. I can go over all the other stuff afterwards. But yeah, let's dig into these players.
So Jay is going to tell us about 4 players he's targeting in drafts. Some of them are players that are largely talked about. Some are lesser talked about, but Jay's going to have a good case for each of them. So he's going to start out. We're going to talk quarterback here. And it was good news yesterday that we heard in Washington, Sam Howell is named the starting quarterback. Now in fantasy drafts, you're going to get him in that 3 quarterback situation, 2 quarterback leagues, quarterback 26. Jay, tell us why we like Sam Howell and how much we should be targeting him in drafts.
Yeah, so the first thing is the cost. I mean, he's really cost you next to nothing. He's the type of guy in Superflex leagues that I really like to target. Somebody who, you don't mind starting when one of your main 2 are out. But, if you kind of wait on your QB2, he's somebody that could emerge as your every week starter, or at least someone to play matchups with. I mean, he's getting Eric Bieniemy coming over from Kansas City, who is an offensive genius. And look at the weapons that he has. Terry McLaurin, one of my favorite guys, Jahan Dotson. We'll get into that a little more later. Curtis Samuel, and the running backs. He's got Bijan Robinson and Antonio Gibson. So tight end leaves a little bit to be desired. But Logan Thomas, hopefully, if he's able to stay healthy, he could make some noise. But one thing people don't realize with Sam Howell too is he's able to get it done on the ground a little as well. He's not going to be a Jalen Hurts or Lamar Jackson, anything like that. But wouldn't be surprised to see him chip in 300-400 yards on the ground, and maybe that'll help cover up some of the mistakes. Some of the interceptions that he'll throw here and there, being a young quarterback. And add some. We want that any extra little edge you can get. And you know what? If he doesn't work out, you're not really spending that much on him. So it's not that, it's not going to cost you.
Yeah, you're not saying my draft is ruined. My late round quarterback didn't work out. Exactly correct. And that running element is really important. We see it all the time. If you chip in 20 yards on the ground, maybe you get an occasional 30, occasionally get in the end zone, that's a big deal in fantasy football. It's always been the cheat code. We're not saying he's Lamar Jackson on the ground, but we are saying you can get things done. And Jay, actually, if Logan Thomas doesn't work out, they're excited about Cole Turner. They're thinking he could do a little bit of damage there. But you pointed it out. I mean, you got Terry McLaurin, you got Jahan Dotson. They have an elite wide receiver room that not many people are talking about here, but it's going to be exciting to see what happens. So yeah, take Jay's word on that. And when you're drafting that, especially that 3rd quarterback in Superflex leagues, it's not a bad place to go. Jay, before we get into the second player, do a real quick answer on this one. Richard wants to know, do you target DJ Moore or Mike Williams first in drafts?
This is tough because I'm a really big Mike Williams fan. It's just the guy can't stay healthy, and every time I say this all the time, this is my go-to line. When he high points the ball and catches it, he goes to the ground, looks like he's been chokeslammed by the Undertaker. He just takes it so physically. I'm gonna have to go with DJ Moore. Obviously it was just one play, and it's the preseason, but man, he's already looking like he could be the Stephon Diggs to Justin Fields, Josh Allen. He's going to be the focus. Mike Williams, I love him. He's going to have those boom weeks, but not only is he having a hard time staying on the field, he's inconsistent. They drafted another wide receiver in Quentin Johnston. I'm very excited about all the weapons. I was about to say San Diego for the Chargers.
Sorry.
But yeah, between those 2 guys, I'm going to have to go DJ Moore.
And Jay, honestly, I'm getting them both. I have a lot of leagues. I'm 4th round, I'm getting DJ Moore. 6th round, Mike Williams has frequently fallen to the 6th round. Sometimes the 5th, depending on my draft, but I can get them both. And so I like the DJ Moore answer that Jay gave, and he's the priority because 3 1,150-yard seasons with bad quarterback play. Last year, the bottom fell out a little bit, but it was even worse than ever. The Bears have to let Justin Fields throw. It's just the year they have to figure out, is this our quarterback in the future? And I think he is at least an average passer. DJ Moore, get the ball in his hands. He's a running back. You could get him the ball deep. DJ Moore is a superstar receiver who's never had a very good or even a decent situation around him. So don't sleep on DJ Moore. The talent has always been there. He's shown us when he's given the chance. And then Mike Williams, I would say one thing, Jay. People keep pointing out the injuries in Mike Williams, and you're right. When he goes high, points the ball, comes down. I loved your analogy about the Undertaker. Last year, he missed 4 games. And I had a couple others, he had partial games. First year, he missed 6 games. The 4 years in between, he's played 15 or 16 games. So for the last 5 years, he's usually on the field. And we get it, Jay. People miss time, right?
Right. Yeah, it's
Invest
football.
in both.
It's going to happen. Yeah,
yes.
I like that answer. Invest in both.
Invest
I would
in
happily
both.
take either on any of my teams.
And Lee tells us to invest, depend on DJ Moore at your own risk, and that's fine. Hey, we own no monopoly on the truth. We have an opinion to take. You are very smart as a football analyst or football player, Lee. You take your step aside on him. No problem. I'm sure there's other players that you have that'll win your league for you. Jay, the next player we're going to talk about, second on the depth chart in Atlanta right now. I think that's hilarious when they do that. Tell us why Bijan Robinson is worth a top 10 pick in fantasy drafts, usually going off the board as RB3.
Yeah, and actually, Jake Seeley gave me a little crap for this because I was in his flex league drafts a couple weekends ago, and I took him as RB2 off the board. I am all in on Bijan Robinson. You know, all these guys, yes, you know, normally when I play fantasy, like we were talking about with Sam Howell, I don't like to buy all the risk. First, second round, you know, there's really no other option because you're you know, there's no other players that you're starting off. And yeah, would the safe play have been like an Austin Eckler or a Nick Chubb or something like that? But all these guys have risks. Every single one of them. You know, we don't know what the Cleveland offense is going to look like. They're talking about they're going to be more pass heavy. And don't get me wrong, I love Nick Chubb. I would not be surprised to see Nick Chubb finishes the RB1, but there's just as good a case that you can make for Bijan Robinson. You know, you got to get rid of the whole, these guys have never played in the NFL before, they're rookies. We don't know, you know, I feel like generational talent is thrown around so much these days, but Bijan Robinson is, you know, in the light of a Saquon Barkley and Ezekiel Elliott, and those guys did finish, you know, top 5. And I think Barkley was RB2 in his rookie year, and actually I took him and he helped me win some championships. So he's
wait a minute. G-Man J?
Shock, right?
I had that. Go ahead. I had to stop you.
Trust me, and that's what I got. Oh, you're a homer. That's what I got. I said, okay, just wait till it gets on the field and gives me those fantasy points. You know, he's in what was the run heaviest offense in the entire NFL last year. He's all but a lock for over 300 touches. He's going to be involved in the passing game. We saw it last night. I don't know if you got to see him in the preseason game. He already, man, he looks electric. I'm excited. He's got the talent. And yes, you know, Tyler Algier got over 1,000 yards in this offense last year. The offense, you know, it can't get any worse than it was last year. A healthy Kyle Pitts, you know, Drake London should be able to keep, you know, anybody from really putting a ton of eight-man stacks in the box. I'm all in. I think he is going to be someone that people are going to regret waiting on, you know, because of these other guys. You know, there's, like I said, there's so many questions. He's in that top tier for me. And if you don't take him second or third running back off the board, you're not going to get him. So call your shots, and I'm calling mine with Bijan. I think he's going to be top 5, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him finish as RB1 overall.
To support your point, Jay, last year the Falcons ran the ball 579 times, which was by far the most in the league. And they were bad game script frequently. I remember the Cincinnati game. They were down 20 points, and they were running the football. This year, they added a number of components on defense. Now, they're not going to be a great defense, but they might be a little bit better. Game scripts may be significantly better. And if they were willing to run in negative game script, that's not changing. And, Jay, when you mentioned team stacking the box, Arthur Smith doesn't care. He'll put 2 and 3 tight ends on the field. He'll put 2 running backs. He's going to put Bijan and Algier on the field at the same time. But they are going to – here's what it is, Jay. The NFL defense has gotten smaller and smaller because they have to defend the pass. So they've gotten smaller and faster. Teams that have gone against the tide, like Arthur Smith and probably the Colts, they have an advantage because when you put all those extra big bodies on the field, you're pushing around smaller bodies because again, the archetype of player on defense has changed. You have a tactical advantage in that area of the game. And with that 579 carries, if Bijan only gets 60% of them, he's well over 300 carries. So I think that's a great call there because that works with Bijan. Let's do a quick question to get to your next two players.
Absolutely.
Famous Jay wants you to know from you. At the 12-13 turn, he took Pollard and CD stack in a best ball draft. And now, how would you rank Pollard, Chubb, and Saquon? So Pollard, Chubb, Saquon, how do you rank those three?
If I had to choose, I would probably go Chubb, Barkley, and Pollard. But I've really started to get in these past few years away from, the number rankings and more of the tier. And those guys are the top tier. I would be perfectly happy with any one of those guys. They're all going to have fantastic years, all in the running for RB1 overall. There's not that much difference when drafting any one of those guys.
And then before the one last comment, I like that Mr. Scampers is very funny. Arthur Smith's going to troll us with a spread pass heavy offense. Watch. Oh, that would be brilliant.
That would be hilarious.
Oh my gosh. All of a sudden, Drake London, wide receiver 3. All right, let's get back at it, Jay. So at wide receiver, so look, a lot of us, we have plenty of our names in the first 5-6 rounds of drafts. But when we're looking outside of there, we have to look for some players that other people aren't necessarily aware of. At pick 86, wide receiver 39, this player is one that is largely off the grid. That's a pick in drafts where it's just kind of late. Tell us why not Terry McLaurin, but Jahan Dotson, well, McLaurin may also be, but tell us why Jahan Dotson is another player in that offense to consider.
Yeah, this isn't talking anything bad about Terry McLaurin. I love Scary Terry, but like you said, where he's going, you can draft Jahan Dotson as a wide receiver 3, a flex play. And, he only played in 12 games last season, but he finished as a wide receiver 2 in 5 of those 12 games. Even though he profiles as a slot wide receiver, they put him all over the field, and he proved he could win against every coverage. He won 73% of the time. Where is it? I got my numbers right here. 70% against man, 80% against zone, 79% against press. And like we were talking about earlier, it's the value. You're not taking that much of a risk. You're getting this guy below his ceiling. What we expect to be a much better offense. He did all that last year with terrible quarterback play from Taylor Heineke and Carson Wentz. I expect Howell, even if he's just decent, he doesn't have to live up to the hype. If Howell is just average, there's no reason Jahan Dotson can't finish as a wide receiver 2 easily.
Well, in worst case scenario, if Sam Howell for some reason craps out, Jacoby Brissett could get him the ball too.
Yep.
So
look what Amari Cooper did last year with Jacoby Brissett, top 10 wide receiver.
Yeah, and we're not throwing shade on Sam Howell. We're just saying if that happens or he misses time,
right,
it still could work out. So yeah, and remember, Jahan Dotson, you're getting as a wide receiver 4, and so you're not, like Jay said, you're not overspending on this player, but he's an elite talent. He was the 16th pick in the draft, and I do not believe that was a reach in any way.
Yeah.
And this is like a strong first-round talent player who you're investing in. And from a defensive standpoint, look, teams are going to worry about McLaurin. He's the proven track record guy. He is the one that gets downfield. He'll see the lion's share of the attention. Dotson will see easier coverage, even if he plays well. McLaurin's a superstar, all established. Mm-hmm. And quick question for you from Brian before we get to our next one. Dotson over Gabe Davis.
Yeah, yes, it's not even a question. And I will say I was out on Gabe Davis for his cost last season, but I'm back in on a post-hype sleeper because of the same reason, where he's going. Take the shot on Gabe Davis now. He was getting drafted at his ceiling last year.
Yeah, and you know what, Jay? There was talk that I don't think it was heavy last year, but he was playing on a high ankle sprain that wasn't really completely healed. And for a guy that's going to be a downfield threat for Josh Allen, getting that first step is really, really important. And it's a game of nanoseconds.
Yep.
And if you don't get off the blocks fast, that play isn't working.
Yep.
They're not these long developing things. So, yes, I agree with you. I do think that Gabe Davis is a player at a discount because people were disappointed last year. And again, you touch that fire, you get your hand burned. You don't want to go back to it.
Exactly.
Like Jay Felicio said, the draft cost has adjusted. Jay, the most common player I've gotten from guests at tight all positions has been Darren Waller, but I always want the guest to talk about it because there's always somebody adds to the discussion because tight end, it's a very important position to deal with because you have to make a stand. Are you going Kelsey or are you going next year or are you punting? I want you to talk about why Darren Waller is the guy at tight end 4.
Yeah, I think that he's, the cost is something that's not going to destroy your team if he doesn't work out. And look at the situation, 2019, 2020, he finished as top 5 tight ends of back-to-back years. He has been dealing with some injuries, and there is some concern with his age and soft tissue injuries, but he's had the time to get healthy, and we saw it last night in the preseason game. When he's on the field, he is Daniel Jones' go-to guy. There's no question. Look at the offenses that have produced these high-end tight ends. Baltimore, Kansas City. What do they have in common with the Giants? Not a real dominant wide receiver 1. He is going to be the guy for this team. And like you said, he's going as tight end 4 or 5 off the board. I got him in the 6th round in the flex league drafts. I will gladly take that. Follow him up. What I've done with Darren Waller, because I have gotten him in a lot of places, and it's not my Giants fan. I'm excited for the cost. He's one of a handful of players that I truly believe can dethrone Travis Kelce as the tight end 1 if everything falls properly. Travis Kelce would have to step back a little bit, but who knows? It's hard to predict anything like that for Travis Kelce. But pair him with I got Sam Laporta. I've been going with a lot of Sam Laporta, one of these rookie tight ends that, if Darren Waller does miss some time, go ahead and throw another one of those high-end, high upside lottery tickets at the end of your bench towards the end of the draft and just, kind of hedge a little bit. But if he's able to stay on the field, volume alone, he'll be a top 5 tight end.
Now, Jay, do you have time for a couple quick comments from the board? And then we'll
absolutely.
Absolutely. Right. So there are people that prefer to punt tight end.
And I play like that a lot too. If I don't get one of those, Travis Kelce's, which I've only started doing here recently, I've always had a hard time paying up for tight end because there's always so many of those punt tight ends that develop. So didn't mean to interrupt you, Jim.
No, not at all. No, you said exactly what we needed to say. Can you give a couple of tight ends that you're looking at if you're punting the position?
Yep. Sam Laporta is one that I'm very high in. I know traditionally rookie tight ends don't produce, but he's in a position, especially with Jameson Williams expected to, he's going to miss at least his first 6 games. He's already banged up. There's a lot of talk of him being involved early and often in this offense, and he plays the type of game that really works well with Jared Goff's strengths. So excited about him. Another rookie, what's his name? Musgrave. Luke Musgrave. Yeah. Again, he's another one that I expect to be involved early and often in the offense. And one that's kind of going under the radar is Dalton Schultz. I really like him, especially for his cost. He's going late rounds in drafts. I like Nico Collins. I like John Mechie, but that's another situation where there's no clear-cut alpha receiver on the team. And Dalton Schultz, we've seen with rookie quarterbacks in the past that they depend on those tight ends. I could see him having a very productive season as well.
Now, Jay, a couple tight ends who I like. I am very heavily invested when I punt on Jahan Dotson. Mm-hmm. The story on Jahan Dotson is this. He was a converted college wide receiver. So the career arc was never going to be one where he was going to be a factor early. But year 3, which was a very perfect timeline, he came on last year, goes over 500 yards, goes for 7 touchdowns, and those 7 touchdowns came like from week 7 to 15. So he really picked it up as the year went on. So that kind of showed the progression into year 3. Now, they come into their offensive philosophy. We're expecting to see a lot of 2 tight end sets. Well, they bring in Foster Moreau. Moreau's going to be the blocker. Jahan Dotson is a real factor down the seam. The interior offensive line for the Saints is not a good – they have some names, but they have not played well. And we don't know what left tackle Trevor Penning is. He was 10th pick in the draft. He was hurt last year, but he hasn't been what they like. Now, right tackle, they're fine. Ryan Ramczyk is good. But what I'm saying is this. Derek Carr, under pressure, he needs to get the ball out. And when you have a down-the-middle seam stretcher in Jahan Dotson, I think he's going to do very, very well. My last one, Jake Ferguson. He's going like he's actually picking up steam. He's up to tight end 22 now.
Oh, wow.
Yes. Yeah, I know. Last 3 days, Fantasy Mojo ADP. That's that micro. If you look at full ADP, you don't see any movement. But I always go to Darren Armani's because I know I want to see what's happening today, right?
Right.
Well, Ferguson, limited sample, right? He was 79th percentile yards after the catch. Dalton Schultz was a catch and fall guy. And so what we have now is Dak Prescott, who reads defenses very well. He'll get to his 4th and 5th reads if he needs to. And middle of the field, he's very good at reading the zone. If Ferguson is in there catching passes over Schultz, we are now going to go from a catch and fall guy to a guy who could do damage after the catch. So I think late in your drafts, he's a steal there. We're going to take one quick one, and then let's move on out. T-Warrior, just got to sum this question up. Are the Steelers going to spread the ball too much in their passing game to end up hurting Deontay Johnson and George Pickens?
I think they'll be okay. Like, they're not going to, unfortunately, with Matt Canada coming back, they're not going to be an explosive offense. I like both Pickens and Johnson. Honestly, probably Johnson a little more for where he's going. There's going to be some positive regression in that the touchdown category. He had way too many targets to wound up with 0. I mean, my guy Laviska Shenault had a receiving touchdown. Deontay Johnson didn't. So if that tells you anything, I think that they'll be fine. Their ceiling is capped, but as long as Matt Canada is still the offensive coordinator, but I think that they'll both be serviceable for fantasy.
And Bobby, from a quick word from Michael Cohen wants to know, what are you thinking about Olave's upside? This is the last question we could take.
Wide receiver 1 potential, easily. Not wide receiver 1 overall, but definitely top 12. With, like you said, he's got Derek Carr, who has produced wide receiver 1s in Oakland. We saw it, in Oakland, both. Las Vegas. So yeah, I'm all in. Definitely breakout candidate. I'm all the wide receiver, second-year wide receivers I'm very excited about, and Olave is at the top of the list.
Now, Jay, I want you to talk for as much time as you like. Tell people what you've going on, where they can find you. I want people to know about your work because people need to be hearing your stuff.
Oh, I appreciate that. Well, first off, I'm a part of the team over at Front Yard Fantasy. Jim, you've been over and been on the show with us a bunch of times. We have a game show Monday through Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern, and basically what we like to do is mix the fun with fantasy, and you learn something, you have some fun. We take traditional games like Jeopardy, Fantasy Fortune, I called it Fantasy Fortune, Wheel of Fortune. We call it Fantasy Fortune, and put a fantasy spin on it. And we'll have player names, we'll have stuff like that. And then we'll dig deep, talk about those players that come up in the puzzles. It's a completely interactive show. Our chat, a bunch of our chat is in here now. Dame, Mr. Scampers, Ladarius, shout out. I love you guys. They are awesome. We have the best chat in the game. You've got a fantastic chat here too, but I got to give a shout out to my FYF family. Yeah, my family. For my family. We've got, actually, this was just announced a couple days ago. We also are doing a draft guide. It is in the vein of, it's more our style. It's not going to be your in-depth analytics, but it is going to have some really good advice in there. And, still with our twist, if you go to Kirk Cousins, he's about as plain Jane as it can be. So you also have a Greek yogurt recipe, plain Greek yogurt recipe when you click Kirk Cousins' name. So there's a bunch of stuff like that in there. Go to frontyardfantasy.com for that. It costs a whopping $10.01. There's a lot of fun in there. It will be updated throughout the season as well. And then, like you mentioned earlier, I have recently joined, been a part of The Athletic. I am on this season to write. I've been doing a mock draft series where I'll get some people from around the industry, do a mock draft, and then I'll break it down. I've been doing it as the early rounds, middle rounds, late rounds, and analyzing the draft, and then what my thought process is, because you've got to be able to, as you're drafting, adjust. Everybody's got their plan going in, and the first one I did, Mike Tyson's quote, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And that's what it's like drafting in fantasy football. So you've got to be able to adjust on the fly, and, giving you the insight of my thought process, different drafts, different styles, things like that. And I'm actually, I don't know if you've seen this or not yet, I'm helping out over at FTN. I'm doing some charting this year with the FTN data team. So I'm definitely getting a little more insight, helping with my analysis there as well. It's been a lot of fun. Shout out Mike Tallis over there. He's been great. And best way you can support, follow me on Twitter at GMenJ. and subscribe to Front Yard Fantasy on YouTube. It's Front Yard Fantasy or just at FYF.
Yeah, please do that. Jay and the Front Yard Fantasy, they have been a favorite of mine for years. And so just make sure you're following. Jay, pleasure talking football with you today. Thanks
Absolutely.
to everyone who joined us today. Join me again Sunday, depending when you're watching this, at 11 a.m. Eastern on RotoWire YouTube, where you're watching it right now. My guest, outstanding fantasy analyst and friend, Darren Armani. Everybody, have a great day. We'll talk soon.